John Harrison came to the door, and he said, oh, what's this? He said, I hear. He said, well, there's something terrible going on down at Grover's Mill. I said, what the hell are you talking about? Why, he said, the meter's falling. And they're all excited, and everybody's scared to death, and it's coming on the radio, and he said, everybody's going pretty near crazy.
I simply don't know. I can't imagine. I mean, you must realize that when I left the broadcast last night, I went into dress rehearsal for a play that's opening in 2 days, and I've had almost no sleep, and I know less about this than you do. I haven't read the papers except
what was the first thing you had?
Well, I said, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I said, if was anything like that happened, I said, everything would be lit up around here, and I said, close as we live. Why, can't be.
I'm, of course, surprised that a story which has become familiar to children through the medium of comic strips, novels, and adventure stories should have had such an immediate and profound effect upon radio listeners.
Well, I felt foolish to do it, but I called up the operator, and I said, what the hell is going on around here? I said, one of my neighbors came in, and he's all excited about what happened at Grover's Mill. Oh, she says it's a radio broadcast.
The Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations present Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air in The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells.
This is John Rieger. The War of the Worlds, broadcast by CBS on October 30th, 1938, is a benchmark in broadcasting. What network executives, advertisers, and a few sociologists might have suspected was suddenly made clear to the world. Radio had unprecedented power over people. It was a clever adaptation of a well-known work by H.G. Wells. An ordinary program of dance music would be interrupted by news bulletins to tell the story of an invasion from Mars. Despite all the usual announcements and the patently impossible sequence of events, listeners across the country panicked.
Ladies and gentlemen, the director of the Mercury Theater and star of these broadcasts, Orson Welles.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century...
Orson Welles was just 22 in 1938, but he was already earning nearly $2,000 a week as a radio actor. His real reputation as an artist, however, was on the stage, where he and John Houseman had made their Mercury Theater Company into a significant force in the avant-garde. When CBS offered Welles his own weekly dramatic series, the New York Times hoped he would bring to radio the experimental techniques that have proved so successful in another medium. But the Mercury Theater on the Air got only a small part of Welles' considerable energies. He and Houseman were consumed by their new stage play that fall, and Welles was making regular flights to see a woman in Chicago. In its 8 p.m. Sunday time slot, the Mercury Theater on the Air was up against the most popular show of the day, Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. Their ratings were so low, they didn't have a sponsor.
War of the Worlds has been brought to you exclusively by the Wizard's Wardrobe Gift and Tie-Dye Center. Located in Mount Lookout Square, the Wizard's Wardrobe features tie-dyed clothing for adults and children, as well as gifts for the holidays. More information is available at 321-1347 from the Wizard's Wardrobe.
So much greater was the surprise then, at the events which unfolded that Sunday night before Halloween.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News, Trenton, New Jersey. It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. We have dispatched a special mobile unit to the scene. We take you now to Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Carl Phillips again, out at the Wilmot Farm, Grover's Mill, New Jersey. I guess that's it. Yes, I guess...
If any calls had come in to CBS, the switchboard operator would send them up to me, and I was the voice of Columbia.
Hal Davis was the 22-year-old night publicity manager at CBS. He worked at a big copy desk on the 17th floor with a bank of telephones and a monitor speaker. Occasionally, a news bulletin would come over the wire, and he'd run it up to the announcer on the 21st floor. But Sunday night was the quiet night in the broadcasting business.
You can see it's cylindrical shape. Something's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is terrific. The top is beginning to rotate like a screw, and this thing must be hollow.
12, 15 minutes into the program, the phone started ringing, and the first one I picked up, a hysterical person, said, "The Martians are invading. What do we do? What do we do?" And I said, "They're not invading. It's just a radio program." And then a person screamed at me.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. It's so awful. The eyes are black and they gleam like a serpent. The mouth is kind of V-shaped with saliva dripping from its rimless lips. It seemed to quiver and pulsate, and the monster, or whatever it is, can hardly move.
Every phone began ringing at once, and everybody was hysterical. So after about 10, 15 minutes of this, I got somebody in the control room. And I said, "Hey, would you tell Orson Welles that people are taking this thing seriously, and they better put on a disclaimer?" And he came back and said, "Orson isn't going to break into the program."
Ladies and gentlemen, here I am, back of a stone wall.
Halfway through the show, cast member Richard Wilson finished his part and left the studio. He had to get back to the stage rehearsal. At the elevator, he met two policemen. They seemed puzzled by the deserted 21st floor. Outside, the War of the Worlds was moving inexorably into the annals of mass psychology.
And the professor moves around one side, studying the object, while the captain and two policemen advance with something in their hands. Flag of truce. If those creatures know what that means, what anything means. Wait a minute, something's happening.
About 15 minutes after that, I guess, the operator called me panicked. And she said, "Hal, it's gotten away from me. I can't handle it." And I said, "Might as well make it plan A. Let's get everybody in here, because this is going past us."
Oh, Lord, they're turning into flames. The whole field's caught up by the woods, the barns, the gas tanks of the automobiles, spreading everywhere. It's coming this way now, about 20 yards to my right.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Grover's Mill. Evidently, there's some difficulty with our field
broadcast. I wasn't listening to it. I remember it very well. I was annoyed by it.
William Paley, founder of CBS, was the boss.
I was at home playing cards, and these telephone calls were coming in. And they wouldn't say what they wanted, but they always wanted to talk to Mr. Paley or whoever was president of CBS. And I'd say, "These people are calling up to make some complaints." I get these all the time, and I'm sick and tired of them. And I got this call from my office saying, "Oh, Mr. Paley, a terrible thing has happened." And there it was, the whole country was bursting wide open.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars.
The events of that night are part of American folklore that survivors retell and embellish to this day. As many as 1 million people in the U.S. and Canada were convinced that Martians were invading. In Newark, New Jersey, 20 families in a single block fled to the streets holding wet towels to their faces. Poison gas. Wells himself would tell the story in later years of actor John Barrymore, who put down his cocktail, went to his kennels, and released the dogs, saying, "Fend for yourselves." It seems inconceivable that anyone listening attentively from the beginning could have been fooled. But many had tuned in casually to a program of dance music. Millions apparently tuned over from the Edgar Bergen show when an unpopular singer came on, just in time to hear people being roasted by Martian heat rays. Many who were fooled were angry. They felt they'd been intentionally duped by the use of fake news bulletins.
Just one moment, please. At least 40 people, including 6 state troopers, lie dead in a field east of the village of Grover's Mill. Their bodies burned and distorted beyond all possible recognition.
Tell you the truth, All that I was trying to do during that period was to make it as exciting as possible. It was a job to me.
As the past fades to black, certain historical constellations begin to shine. Howard Koch is just one of the remarkable collection of stars whose names are associated with the Mercury Theater. Eventually, he'd go on to write the screenplay to Casablanca. He would also be blacklisted, a member of the original Hollywood 19. But in 1938, Howard Koch was working his first professional writing job, turning out a script a week for the Mercury Theater for the princely sum of $75. To Koch, The War of the Worlds had seemed an unpromising project. Wells wanted the story told in a series of news bulletins. That would mean not just an adaptation of the tale, but, in effect, an original play. There was no time to lose.
I had paid a hurried visit to my father, who was ill in Kingston here, and coming down on the west side of the Hudson River, I suddenly realized if I'm going to lay out this campaign, I better have a map. So I stopped. I was on the Jersey side of the river, and I stopped at a gas station. They gave me a Jersey map. When I got to my apartment, I began work right away. I didn't have much time, and I spread the map out on the top of the desk and closed my eyes, put the pencil down, landed on Grover's Mills. I thought, well, there's a good sound, American and real.
If Grover's Mill lent a note of reality to Howard Koch's play, The War of the Worlds brought a period of intense unreality here to Grover's Mill, where people reacted just like the rest of the country.
Mr. Hall, he had the store. He put his cash register in the car and some food and was taken off to the mountains. And him and his...
The story I got was he took the cash register and the kids, and without the kids, and took off without the wife and kids. Now, that's the story I got.
A lot of people see things which they had never seen before.
Hallucinations, no less.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But it was a pure question of stark, naked fear.
But unlike the rest of the country, here the unreality persisted. The next day, Grover's Mill was jammed with tourists and journalists looking for the place where the Martians didn't land. The War of the Worlds had apparently put Grover's Mill on the map, and on the map is where Grover's Mill plans to stay.
This is the place where the Martians landed. We have no burn marks to show people anymore, but we will have a very fine bronze monument.
Doug Forrester is the man in charge of the 50th anniversary celebration of the day the Martians landed. It's a 4-day series of events ranging from scholarly discussions of Mars to the official dedication of the Martian landing site.
This will be the terminus of the parade, and what will happen is the parade participants will march down and the monument will have been installed.
I put it on a bar, plugged it in, and asked everybody to be quiet. It's a local tavern up the street. And the farmers start listening. I can name half of them probably. So immediately Sam Dice says, well, gosh, damn, I'm going after my shotgun. And now Hildy and everybody else, everybody's getting a shotgun, and they're coming back. And now we're going to Grover's Mills. And I, a young 13-year-old, I also have a shotgun.
You're looking at the famous Grover's Mill water tower, which was, by reliable sources, victim of buckshot on the night of October 30th, 1938. As you can see, it looms menacingly, and I think that it does bear a striking resemblance to the description of the Martian machines.
Now we get up there, look by the lake at Grover's Mills. There's nothing but a lot of people, no 100-foot Martians, this and that. And at that time, Orson Welles had better not have shown up anyplace.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
toward the camera.
There was little danger of that. Mr. Wells had another engagement.
Of terror at the time you were giving this role, were you aware that terror was going on throughout the nation?
Oh, no, of course not. We did Dracula, and it seemed to me during Dracula I had high hopes that people would react as they do in a movie of that kind, and I don't know that they did particularly, and so I've given up. One doesn't believe in the radio audience much. You don't know that whether they're listening or not. You have no idea how many people are listening or what they're thinking. I had every hope that the people would be excited as they would be at a melodrama. But radio is new, and we are learning about the effect it has on people. Learned a terrible lesson.
Do you think that this will cause the curbing?
The question has persisted. Did he do it on purpose? Though Wells later would coyly embellish the legend, the surviving participants unanimously maintain they had no way to guess what would happen. Yet, hindsight can see that there were clues. In 1931, CBS moved to take the increasingly controversial Father Coughlin off the air. When he asked his listeners briefly for support, 1,250,000 letters arrived at CBS. Bishop Gallagher of Detroit crowed that Coughlin and modern radio techniques could have prevented the Russian Revolution. In 1935, CBS produced a handsome brochure for its advertisers entitled, "You Do What You're Told." Listen to this. Have a cigarette. Shake hands with Jim Brown. Don't go yet. 9 times out of 10, you do what you're told. This was easy for advertisers to swallow. They were already rushing to turn the airwaves into what radio pioneer Lee DeForest had called a huckstering orgy. With radio, you could reach people in their living rooms, in their cars, in their bedrooms, all at the same instant. Even if just 1 in 10 did what they were told, it would be a virtual mass movement. Of course, Head for the Hills, The Martians Are Coming, is a far cry from Reach for a Lucky instead of a Sweet. But crucially, it was very close to another message coming from the airwaves that year.
This is Bob Trout speaking to you from New York, opening Columbia's shortwave transatlantic program to cover the key cities.
1938 was the year radio came into its own as a news source. When Nazi Germany annexed Austria in March, Americans were glued to their radios for live hookups from Europe.
We take you now to London, England.
While Hitler continued, or you might say, completed his triumphal conquest of Austria
The familiar voice of William Shirer in London, and CBS European chief Edward R. Murrow in Vienna.
We're planning to bring you an eyewitness account of Herr Hitler's entry into Vienna sometime tomorrow.
In September, Hitler's demands for Czech territory created another crisis.
Adolf Hitler has spoken, and the world has listened, because it feared that this speech might mean war.
CBS commentator H.V. Kaltenborn, who lived in the studio during the tense days that led to Munich. The talk was of war in Europe. The sound was the sound of radio news. Princeton psychology professor Joel Cooper.
Newspaper accounts, social historians of the day certainly will attest to the fact that there was an unease as people worried about the events that were happening in Europe. This kind of unease, this kind of anxiety, is very difficult for people to explain. It was not that they were anticipating an attack from the Germans or the Italians. It was not that they were anticipating some imminent event, and yet there was this general feeling of unease. When an event can occur that can help to explain that unease, people jump to it. And on the Halloween Eve of 1938, an event did occur.
I'm speaking from the roof of Broadcasting Building. I'm speaking from the roof of Broadcasting Building, New York City. The bells you hear are ringing to warn the people to evacuate the city as Martians approach. Estimated in the last 2 hours, 3 million people have moved out along the roads to the north. Hutchison River Parkway still kept open for motor traffic. Avoid bridges to Long Island, hopelessly jammed. All communication with Jersey Shore closed 10 minutes ago. No more defenses. Our army is wiped out. Artillery, Air Force, everything wiped out. This may be the last broadcast. We'll stay here to the end.
It became of course, in retrospect anyway, a comedy of not so much, well, there was a big error.
American humorist Steve Allen was 17 years old in 1938. He lived in a hotel in Chicago with his mother and his aunt.
We rushed out into the hall to try to get to the elevator and downstairs and out of the building. Somehow they thought it would be safer on the street, which makes no sense. So a wonderful fellow, a black elevator operator who had also taught me to drive that season, marvelous guy, he was afraid suddenly because he thought he was facing three loonies, and I guess for that few minutes he was, particularly when we told him that there were things up in the sky, and he wanted to know what things. And there was also a woman standing with a, 3 or 4 year old girl in her arms, waiting for the elevator. The woman gave us the appropriate reaction, So this infuriated my Aunt Mag, and she said, "Oh, you can laugh, but for the sake of that dear infant in your arms, don't you dare laugh." So then the woman began to walk backwards and keep an eye on us at all times. This ridiculous scene was quickly transported to the lobby when the elevator door opened downstairs, and we rushed into the lobby. And at that moment, I heard a radio which was turned on in the lobby, and I believe it had the Edgar Berg and Charlie McCarthy show on it. So at that moment, reality broke in, and I think it was my aunt said, at that point, she said, "We're going to have to move out of this hotel."
You are listening to a CBS presentation of Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air in an original dramatization of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells.
The War of the Worlds panic is an oft-told tale. So here, as a corrective for some of the abuses of colorful storytelling, are the facts. 6 to 12 million people heard the broadcast. 1 million believed it. In the nationwide panic that followed, no one was killed. William Paley.
I sort of liked it, I think, because it showed you how powerful this medium was. It turned the whole country on its ear, really it did.
Howard Koch.
Well, we didn't know for a few days whether we'd be villains or heroes, because the suits were started against the CBS, and we didn't know. We thought we may be put off the air, we may be prosecuted.
We had about 58 legal actions, I think. I think we won them all, but it meant going to court and having lawyers and defending ourselves against outrageous demands for money and God knows what. People who were suffering from it, they couldn't take it. They thought they were in a terrible situation. Many people thinking they were in the path of death and believed it and were suffering terribly. And of course I felt very badly about them and so forth, but what can you do about it?
Steve Allen.
Even today, before we compliment ourselves, even today there are people who firmly believe that soap operas, just to give one instance, represent reality. Whenever a character on a popular soap opera gets married, hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of people send wedding gifts. And here again, these same people, I'm sure, think they should know who should be our next president and what we should do about revising the Constitution and so forth. So these are alarming facts, but they must be faced.
I am disappointed in the gullibility of the American people politically, as well as in this instance, that they accept the most outrageous things as truths. There are good schools in our country, but I guess there are a lot of schools that don't teach the fundamental things of how to think for yourself, how to think logically. In that aspect, it was a warning.
Joel Cooper.
I think it can happen again. What we've seen is that this is an event that tends to happen when people are anxious and have very little explanation for that anxiety. I think during Cold War, when there is not the immediate threat of a missile crisis or an attack that's occurred in close time contiguity, then what people are left with is a general form of anxiety. And in that kind of situation, I think it could happen again. It certainly wouldn't happen with the landing of Martians at Grover's Mill.
The panic had one immediate effect on broadcast policy. Interruptions for fictional news bulletins were out. The Mercury Theater on the Air, however, suddenly found itself with a sponsor, Campbell's Soup, which thought perhaps, as one commentator has put it, that Orson Welles could create a stampede for their product. For Howard Koch, John Houseman, and Orson Welles, the panic broadcast was a ticket to Hollywood. Welles, in particular, would land a movie deal giving him unprecedented creative control, and the result would be a movie called Citizen Kane.
I had one indication as I went down to the studio the next day to talk with him. Orson was coming out of an upstairs balcony or something, and Houseman was coming in from below. And Orson made this sign of, "We're in," and Houseman made the sign back.
This is Orson Welles, ladies and gentlemen, out of character, to assure you that the War of the Worlds has no further significance than as the holiday offering it was intended to be. The Mercury Theater's own radio version of dressing up in a sheet and jumping out of a bush and saying boo. Starting now, we couldn't soap all your windows and steal all your garden gates. By tomorrow night, so we did the best next thing. We annihilated the world before your very ears and utterly destroyed the CBS. You will be relieved, I hope, to learn that we didn't mean it and that both institutions are still open for business. So goodbye, everybody, and remember, please, for the next day or so, the terrible lesson you learned tonight. That grinning, glowing, globular invader of your living room is an inhabitant of the pumpkin patch, and if your doorbell rings and nobody's there, that was no Martian, it's Halloween.
Tonight, the Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations coast to coast has brought you The War of the World by H.G. Wells.
The Day the Martians Landed was produced in part with materials generously provided by Ed Klein and Julie Simmons, and with funds from the National Endowment for the Arts and McGavern Guild Radio. This is your producer, John Rieger, speaking. Presented by WGBH Radio, Boston, this has been an Otherworld Media production.
War of the Worlds has been brought to you exclusively by the Wizard's Wardrobe Gift and Tie-Dye Center. Located in Mount Lookout Square, the Wizard's Wardrobe features tie-dyed clothing for adults and children, as well as gifts for the holidays. More information is available at 321-1347 from the Wizard's Wardrobe.
9:27 here at the WVXU stations. Coming up at 9:30, our new edition of War of the Worlds 1988. That'll be coming up at 9:30. And let's take a look at the WVXU station's forecast for Cincinnati, Dayton, and South Central Ohio. Tonight, mostly clear and cold with a low near 27. Tomorrow, mostly sunny with a high near 55. Tomorrow night, increasing cloudiness, a low near 40. And Tuesday, variable cloudiness with a 30% chance of showers and a high near 60. The extended forecast for Wednesday through Friday, fair Wednesday and Thursday, a chance of rain on Friday. Highs will be near 55 Wednesday and Friday, and near 65 on Thursday. The lows will be near 42 degrees. Currently at the WVXU studios, it's 38 degrees.
Here's a list of just some of the spooky happenings in Greater Cincinnati this weekend.
The Q102 Haunted House at St. Rita's School for the Deaf will be open this weekend from 7 to 11. Cost is $2 and proceeds benefit St. Rita's. Miami Civic Center's Haunted House will also be open from 7 to 11. The center is on Bridgetown Road in Miami Heights, and a $2 donation will benefit MDA, the Free Store, and local Boy Scouts. At the Walnut Hills Montessori Center, a haunted house will be open from 7:30 to 11. The center is on Beecher Street and cost is $2. In Newport, try the haunted house sponsored by the American Legion at 22 East 6th Street. Cost is 50 cents and they will be open from 6 until 10. If you're looking for something a little different to try, the Horseshoe Valley's Haunted Trail in Mount Healthy on the corner of Adams and Miles Road. The walk is open from 7:30 to 11, or for a special children's event from 4:30 to 9. Cost is $2. Cedar Creek Haunted Pioneer Village has special tours and hay rides this weekend from 8 until 11, $2 for adults and $1 for kids. For the outdoorsmen, East Fork State Park will have a haunted campout at the park in Bethel. Regular camping fees apply. To benefit cystic fibrosis, a haunted party for children at Emmanuel Presbyterian Church in Clifton. It'll be Monday from 4 until 7, and cost is $5. For the nimble or not so nimble-footed, a masquerade dance at Surrey Square Mall Saturday from 9:30 to 1. Cost is $10 a person or $15 a couple. And for the athletic, the Monster Dash beginning at 9 a.m. Saturday at Woodland Mound Park in Anderson Township. Diane Bourne, WVXU News.
And if you would like to know when your area trick-or-treats, call WVXU's Jackie O'Lantern Trick-or-Treat telephone. The number is 841-9898, 841-WVXU.
We're proud to serve Southwest and South Central Ohio. FM 89.3 WVXC Chillicothe and WVXU Cincinnati, FM 91.7.
Coming up, 2 hours of vintage music for a Sunday night on Reminiscing in Tempo. I'm Rose Butler, and tonight I'll take you back 50 years to 1938. We were coming out of the Depression then. Business was better, more men were back at work, sales were picking up, and the big bands were thriving. Music from 1938. Stay with us.
Rose will be coming right up on the fictional part of today's programming, which is supported in part by a major grant from McGavran Guild Radio.
Stardrift, October 30th. It's a good night to see the South Pole on a world far beyond our own. More on that in a moment.